because of our biology and because we're a fear-based animal, we focus on all of these hurts rather than seeing the corresponding above the line joy that is equal to all of these hurts. And the magic happens when this awareness that if I lose my daughters, that hurts because I love them. Pain is literally love, but as a biological animal, we are wired to not touch stoves and to avoid pain. Another way of saying that is we're biologically wired to avoid love. And that's really scary. And that's where people fall into this concept. This is what I have to be perfect, so I never feel this sense of pain. My name is Dr. Doug Brackmann, and I am a licensed psychologist, and I'm here to tell you about how you work. And as a psychologist, we talk a lot about identity. And so this is a little bit off the driven path. I'm an author of a book called Driven. If you are driven and you haven't heard of my content, please go to my website and take a look at the Driven assessment. But this video pretty much applies to everybody on the planet. And so it's not specifically tailored toward Drivens. And I've been drawing this picture for about 15, 20 years. And I've simplified it. And this is the basic intro video into self-psychology. So how does this self work? And believe it or not, this is very simple, capturing a lot of very complex ideas. Identity. When you think about identity, when you think about the sense of self, it is a confusing, it goes in 10,000 different tangents. But really this concept of self is really a trick of our biology. And you see me point to two different operating systems. So we got an operating system down below our nose, and it is a recording device. It is a hardware recording device. And this recording device simply records experiences via an electrical chemical system. So very simply, you touch a hot stove, every cell in that nerve pathway remembers that experience, comes right to here, to the spine, and it hits the spine, and the spine, the central nervous system, this thing that winds itself through our entire body and then encapsulates itself in our brain, is the original mind. So we have this brain up here, but this mind that goes through. So you touch a hot stove, all that impulse comes through the nerve system. All of those nerves, a little tick in the DNA along the way, remembering it. We have nerve memory. So as it fires together, it remembers those firings. So the next time you touch it, the information travels from the threat to the mind quicker. Once it hits the spine, and it hits this spine, it sends back an impulse to contract muscles. So it's a reflexive system. And again, it is hardwired into all of the muscles. So the next time you come to a stove and you touch it, the threat is there shorter time. So it's a reflex. Doesn't get anybody in trouble. And what gets us in trouble is this little sucker right here. So in the middle of our heads, we have brain stem and spine winding itself through our entire body. But this sucker, this is hardware, literally hardwired. This limbic cluster with the thalamus in the middle of it is the software system. So what this thing does, very simply, it records square metal box with 4 circles on top. It can be a 1910 wood burner, got that shape, or a glass top that has 4 circles on top. It's close enough that we feel a little bit of that trauma or the ping to this invisible radar out to the world, and we feel that in the body. We don't know, and it is, not a mystery where the unconscious is. The unconscious is all right here. It's all recorded in the body. And this thing and this thing work together, and as long as you're awake, conscious, this operating system, looking for patterns to match previous experience, again, when a pattern's match, ping to the radar, we get a little taste of this trauma. So we don't actually have to experience the trauma again to remember what it feels like. That's not a remember, it's a replay. So this thing and this thing operate very different than this thing. This neocortex, neo meaning new brain that's up on top of your head, what it does is very different than what this does. This thing is a real-time operating machine. It's a lizard brain. Parts of it are very deeply lizard, meaning that you're scanning the world, you're looking around at the world, and if a pattern of threat is not matched, it's designed to come out of sympathetic arousal and go into parasympathetic rest, restore, relax. So all that noise banging around in your head is simply that this thing is running patterns of potential threats that aren't happening now, could happen in the future, and they're recalling the past, and we have all of this emotion or feeling sensation going in the body, comes back up into this, and then reinterprets it, turns it into emotion. So this is a key variable in really understanding our biology and how the sense of self, for this identity thing, is created. So following that, you at one time did not exist in time. Literally, you did not exist as you are now in time. Time did not exist for you. Part of you was with your father. Another part of you was with your mother. Those two things come together, and all of a sudden, time begins for you. So there you are, just a little single-cell organism. Then time begins. So as time begins, all this time is not real, so to speak, meaning that, we don't understand really, was there a beginning or an end to time? But there is for you. Here's an interesting little line. And so this little line, let's call this right here the present moment. So living way out here in the present, 10, 20, 30, however old you are, years from now, for me, 56 years later, here I am. But way back here, when I began, this little line is really important because what it represents is we are born basically a ball of meat, a very susceptible to danger in this world. Literally, we're a ball of meat. So we are completely dependent on caregivers. We should have been born in a pouch, and literally should have been born in a pouch, or, because we are completely independent for 3, 4, 5, 7 years, 10 years before you can even hope to survive on your own. So this little line right here represents something called latency. What is latency? Delay, literally what latency means. So we're not done cooking yet. And prior to this, we are completely dependent on this wonderful thing called attachment. And so literally, the greatest fear of all human beings is abandonment, because to be separated from your mother at birth is this incredible threat to our biology, because we don't have this time machine even working yet. So you hear in the trauma community, pre-verbal traumas. What does that mean? It means literally your verbalization in your head, the part of our brain that is conscious, aware, awake, isn't even online yet. That's why you can't remember things when you're 1 and 2 and 3. You start to get little glimmers of some memories. And by 4 and 5, this thing starts to really kick in. Traumas, like I said, touch on hot stoves, or perceived threats of abandonment, are recorded in the body. Make these as little X's. And these recordings of threat come out as pain. Painful. So things below the line are pain. We'll call this joy up here. We are a fear-based machine, meaning that we pay attention to getting hit with a stick 10 times, 100 times more than actually getting a carrot. And so we are really programmed to keep track of these traumas. This latency period means that these things are just recorded in the body. They're not even cognizant in our head. We don't even have the memories of them. But as the book says, the body keeps the score. The body remembers these things literally on a DNA level. But once latency has been accomplished and you're 3 and you figure out that if I have a pattern of street and I'm running towards it, what happens? Mom screams, signal this threat that I might be abandoned, and hopefully this helplessness and our ability to predict reduces the number of traumas that we experience. And so still in there, car wrecks in 2nd grade and 7th grade and 4th grade and all of these different experiences. But what happens is rather than recording new traumas in the body, this neocortex working with the limbic cluster, when you see a threat in the future, here's the present moment, I think about what it's like to be, I'm horrible at spelling, and I have some trauma around 2nd grade and spelling test. If I think about, as I'm typing along, writing my next book or whatever, and I see the little red squiggly line underneath, it pings this. I think about that. Present moment then comes back through here, and it looks for patterns that match this previous experience. So I've got some abandonment stuff when I was a kid. I got second grade spelling. And then that time in sixth grade when the girl laughed at me about me trying to spell a word. That comes flooding into the body. And these sensations that are created are based on this weird compilation of all of these different patterns called coupling dynamics in trauma land. But what it does then, it fills the body with these sensations, mostly pain, and then fear. And fear is this anticipatory threat, and it's separate from pain. So you're feeling the pain in the moment, but the neocortex, remember, time doesn't exist down here. So the neocortex is saying, ooh, that would if I turn this in and people laugh at me, I'm making videos and I can't spell words, because it reminds me of the time I could have gotten kicked out of the herd. And so it's a very simple system, and this way this biology works with this psychology creates this mental model, emotional model, and sensory model for how the world works. Really key in kind of the next step that happens. So if this is the future here, what do we do in the future with this massive neocortex? Carl Jung called it a personic ideal. So he called it who is the ideal Doug that doesn't miss any spelling words, that actually that second grade spelling, you wonder why I had 2 PhDs, is because of those feelings of not being smart enough. So those propel me into creating this mental image of who and what I have to be to never feel this big ball of hurt. And this big ball of hurt is really mostly abandonment is number one. So here's my spelling. I think I got it right. And a much smaller category in here, this immediate threat or things that might eat me. These things are like spiders and cats and dogs. Abandonment is the number one fear of all human beings. And so that is the basis for really how we construct the self. Carl Jung came up with how these things work together. He called this the shadow. And this is the unconscious recordings of all this hurt and pain in the body. Eckhart Tolle called it the pain body. Everybody's kind of got their own, concept of it, but very simply, you draw this picture like this. This then is the ideal me, it's who I ideally want to be. And then we have this ego. All that noise in your head is constantly comparing what they think of me, the image that I'm putting out to the world, and actually how it responds in my body. And so that this shadow, I don't want to see this part of me because they will kick me out of the herd. And that ego structure then, which is largely fear-based, is constantly comparing, going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And so impression management, we're always dancing a little bit to actually give a good impression. And this whole thing is what Carl Jung called the lowercase self. And so this lowercase self is what most people conceive of as the self. The ego psychologists, and I won't go down those rabbit holes, but most talk therapy is really dealing with how do you create this ideal self and changing this talk between, what I think of me and what I feel about me, or what my felt experience is of me. I have some words about cognitive behavioral therapy. The shadow work, the trauma healer is really trying to clean out these reactions in the body. Therefore, you don't even have to guard them anymore. So it's a little bit different model, but very simply, I always ask, what is the joke? What is the joke about this whole thing? It is not real. It is 100% nothing real about it. Not real. What do I mean by that? It's a complete confabulation of our biology. And it is, as the Buddha said, and Vedic Christianity, early Christianity really talked about killing of the self, or reading of the self, or shrinking your ego. That's what they're referring to. This is the self you're trying to kill. How do I know it's not real? Because this present moment is also not static. We can expand our awareness of things happening in the present. And so this is what Heideggerian psychology calls beingness. So this being is, I'm being and I'm just skiing. And if you're just skiing, what happens? Time seems to fall away and you don't even think about time. Time actually seems to slow down. And yes, those are experiences, but your consciousness is literally expanding. And so get down on the bottom of the ski slope, plan, look at your watch. How much more time do I have can I do another run? Here comes the sense of self back. And if I'm late, what are they going to think of me? And oh my God, what time is dinner? I have time for one more run. And you go back and you lose yourself skiing. Carl Jung called this concept. He said that there is another self in there. He called this a capital S self. And this capital S self is the one who is observing the monkey and the elephant dance. And the neocortex and the body's dance. And so these are not created equal, meaning that these feelings of joy in Tibetan Buddhism, this is called heaven realms, because these feelings of connectedness, again, remember abandonment. We want to feel connected. You can go all the way up, Jacob's ladder, and really experience how everything is connected. The other end of the spectrum. Dante's Inferno to hell. And is this experience of being completely not lonely, but alone. And that's a being level or this observer level that you really do know we are ultimately completely alone. And as you're descending into greater and greater levels of pain, these experiences are horrible, terrible. And this is where you want to kill yourself. And I say that in Driven in my book. People walking in the office and go, I want to kill myself. And I go, yes, fantastic. Because it's this thing you're talking about. It's not this. It's not reality. So great point there. Where is reality on this chart? So you watching this, where is reality? Very simply, it is this one little dot right in the middle. And Heidegger, this is called Design in German. Heidegger talked about how this was being and time. It's that intersection between our beingness and the concept of time. And it is profoundly liberating when you actually can have the insight to this, that there is no self, that this is completely fabricated, that reality is here. But our perceptions or our sensational experiences of being in heaven and hell are also here and now. So it's I build off that concept and a lot of the stuff I talk about in trauma healing. I got videos coming up for you about trauma healing and very specifically what happens when you see that fear only exists when you're focused on the future. You have regret, you have pain, and then you have joy. But here's reality. And we're constantly balancing between this heaven and hell, past, present, future. And as we drop in and the self falls away, skiing or video games, any of these things that actually pull you into the present, it's a very liberating experience. Most important takeaway from this video, here's the key to it. The present moment. What is this thing in the present moment? Very simply, what is these feelings of separation? You're being separated from those we love. You cut yourself. You experience pain because you're being separated. You're being cut in two, literally, from what do you love? Life. And as you ascend upward or descend downward, these experiences, these feelings or sensations of being separate, being two or one, actually are in perfect harmony and balance, believe it or not. And this is where the concept of non-duality comes from. And so this non-dual moment where we're both two and one, and the past is not real, nor is the future. What is this thing in the present? And this is one of my favorite names for God, and this is where it gets into mysticism really quick, and I have tons of other videos coming on this. What is this? This is one simple word, L-O-V-E. The only thing in the present moment is love. Big jump? Well, why do these things hurt? I think about losing my daughters. How would that feel? I would be torn up. Why? Because up here, there's an equal and opposite awareness of everything down here. And so these are literally matched. But because of our biology and because we're a fear-based animal, we focus on all of these hurts rather than seeing the corresponding above the line joy that is equal to all of these hurts. And the magic happens when this awareness that if I lose my daughters, that hurts because I love them. Pain is literally love. Pain is love. But as a biological animal, we are wired to not touch stoves and to avoid pain. Another way of saying that is we're biologically wired to avoid love. And that's really scary. And that's where people fall into this concept. This is what I have to be perfect, so I never feel this sense of pain. And that's toxic perfectionism. People that identify with this, that's narcissism. And that is literally what that means, is that, you identify with this ideal me. Other people I tend to work with are much more identified with their shadow or their shame. And their shame-based me, none of which are real. Once you get this, and I call it the logical container in the book Driven, to where there's a logical, rational container to look at this crazy chart you had drawn and really understand that right here and now, that the pain that you're feeling is actually, and if you biologically hold the pain, it will spontaneously condense the feelings of two and then release into these wild feelings of one. And that's trauma healing. That's basically how trauma healing works. It's a biological way of actually experiencing these traumas, letting these traumas come up in the context of safety, in the context of not being scared of them or bracing against them. You disinhibit the body and let this energy move through you. It will come back up here. And then it comes around and around and around and around. The wildest part of this is we now, in genetic land, we can track trauma healing and actually see little snips. We're just starting to really figure these things out, not even close figuring them out. I don't want to kid you, but we can see DNA changes now when you do trauma healing. What's actually happening is that when this thing and this thing couple up and actually wind themselves away, on a DNA level, the body is releasing these things, meaning that the next time you see spelling words, and I've done this a ton. The next time I see a word squiggly line, it doesn't pain me as strong, a little bit left, but it very quickly turns into gratitude that I'm not this shadow, I'm not my feelings. And so, a lot said there. You may have to watch this twice. I encourage you. I've also got other videos about the monkeys and elephants. That's another metaphor that I use, and that's a self-sabotaging video. I've got a ton more videos coming. So this is just the beginning of a lot of stuff. But very simply, the takeaways for this, right here and now, is all you've really got. All of these sensations of being in pain or in joy are simply sensations. They're not you. Fear and regret aren't real, nor is your sense of self.